Hi, everyone. My name is Joe Press, and I'm the founder of Archers Raiders, a fan group designed to unite politically progressive fans, students, and alumni of the Morehouse Maroon Tigers and Colgate Raiders. This is the fifth installment of our interview and profile series called The Remarkable Student Athletes of Morehouse and Colgate. My guest today is Bobby Foose, a senior environmental economics major at Colgate University. Bobby was a midfielder and captain of the Colgate Raiders men's soccer team. He's been a key contributor to the team during each of his 4 seasons at Colgate and made the Academic All-Patriot League team for the 2021 season. So, Bobby, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
All right. So, I'd like to start by asking you about your journey to Colgate and your career up to this point. So while you were attending and playing for Bethesda Soccer Club, what was the recruitment process like for you? And which schools were you considering?
Yeah, so my recruiting experience was very unique. Like you said, I wasn't allowed to play high school. I played for Bethesda Soccer Club. Like you said, some of my best friends in life were from there. It was a great club. I was there since I was 10 years old. So it was a very competitive team. I think 15 or 16 of 17 players went Division One. So um, I always knew I wanted to leverage soccer and my work in the classroom to get into a top academic school. So I was looking mainly at Ivy League schools, Patriot League schools, um, a couple Division 3 schools in the NESCAC, and then the four I mainly narrowed it down to in the end were Colgate, Bucknell, Dartmouth, Yale, and Middlebury and Tufts. But yeah, I really wanted to go to a top academic institution that also was good at soccer.
Gotcha. I can dig it. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I know we discussed previously, the academic rigor of your high school, Winston Churchill. So it would make sense that you wanted, to continue working towards your academic goals while also being able to play soccer at a
Yeah.
high level. So at what point in your career at Bethesda Soccer Club did Colgate specifically express serious interest in you?
Yeah, so it was my junior year at a showcase in Florida. I knew so one of my good friends was headed there. He was the class above me, Baraka Kingi. So he had told me all about it. I'd heard great things from him. And then Coach Rainier, who's no longer at Colgate, saw me play at the showcase. I thought I had a pretty good showing. Got along with him right away, and I went up that summer for a visit with my mom. Um, got along great with the staff. Loved the campus; was so beautiful, and I got a really good tour. Thought academically it would be great for me with pretty small class sizes, and yeah, I loved it.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes I can dig it. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. That was one thing I really enjoyed about Morehouse as well. Like with it being a very
Yeah,
intimate small campus, small class sizes, you don't
yeah,
feel like at some of the bigger state schools you can feel like you're just a number. Don't get to build those same relationships with professors. So yeah, that's
absolutely.
awesome.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Um, all right. So moving on here, Coach Eric Ronning is perhaps the most accomplished men's soccer coach in Colgate history. And so, what was it like playing for him, and what was your relationship like with him?
Yeah, very very proud to have been a part of this program and thankful to Coach Ronning for that. He is incredibly dedicated to Colgate. He went there himself. Cares about the program immensely. I think one of the things that makes Colgate so successful is how how much the small things are stressed. Practices are incredibly intense. I think it's a pretty unique environment where from the beginning of my career, we were bred to believe that we can play against any team in the country at any moment and give them a run for their money. And like coming into a nationally ranked program, they had done really well the years before. Getting to play on such a large stage against um, really highly ranked opponents wasn't. I mean, it wasn't just an honor. It was like so exciting for me. It was a lot of fun. every game had kind of a heightened atmosphere. He makes you feel like you're in such a special environment, and that these games you'll remember for your whole life. He makes it really exciting, and I'm grateful for that.
I can dig it. Yeah, that was something that when I talked to Max before, he said something similar. The intensity of specifically about the intensity of practices, how important like the smaller details are, and sort of an understanding within the program that each of you individually has a lot of talent, and so really
Yeah,
sort of fostering a team environment where the players are willing to sacrifice for one another. Where work ethic is very important.
yeah, yeah,
That's
absolutely.
awesome. So as you reflect on your soccer career at Colgate, what would you say was the most memorable experience you've had?
Yeah, it's a really tough question because it's hard to decide between little and small when it comes to memorable. But every day in the locker room for me was, or every meal too, was so unique and such a privilege for me. But I think the two soccer related memories that stood out to me the most were both in my senior year. But the Providence game, the first win of the season, coming off of a poor season like we had my junior year, where we knew we were capable of more, and then grinding through the spring, grinding through preseason, really coming together as a group, and knowing that we'd do anything for each other. Going down 1-0, going down 2-1 in that game, and clawing back to win 3-2 against a ranked team in the first college soccer game of the entire year. That was incredible. Almost brought me to tears. We were all so united that day. And I think another memory was at the end of the year, we found ourselves on the brink of playoffs after tying a bunch of games, and we went down 1-0 at Lehigh, and came back and scored 3 goals. So there was just contributions from every single guy on the field, on the bench in those games, and it was such a family in those 2 wins for me.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine both of those experiences being awesome. I think the Lehigh game, I specifically remember watching that one. I actually got it recorded and saved on my Google Drive because after a certain period
Oh,
of time, the ESPN Plus they get rid of the old games. I'm like, I got to keep this one. And
yeah, I'd love to get that from you.
what'd you say?
I said I'd love to get that recording from you.
Oh yeah, I was sending it to you, man. But because you scored twice in that game, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was a special game.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. And the announcer, I can't remember how many times he said, "Yeah, the playoff implications on this are huge." But out of the
Yeah,
first two times, about the fifth and sixth time, I'm like, "All right, bro, I understand. This is a significant game."
yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
but y'all really rose to the occasion, so I can imagine. I can only imagine how awesome the feeling was to secure that victory and the spot in the playoffs.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Hmm. All right. So now I want to shift gears a bit. Many people mistakenly believe that athletes are one dimensional. They lack the ability to speak on important political issues facing America today. Of course, this could not be further from the truth. The reality is that professional and collegiate athletes are intimately connected to their communities and deeply understand the challenges facing them. I think this is especially true of Morehouse men and Colgate graduates. So that being said, I want to talk about a few issues being discussed and debated in our national political discourse. And since you're an environmental economics major, I'm going to start by asking a couple questions about the intersection of climate change and political economy.
Mhm.
All right, so the Green New Deal has been talked about a great deal in our political discourse. A series of policies and programs proposed by Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Markey in 2019, designed to transition America to 100% renewable, zero emission energy sources by 2030. There's a broad set of policies uh, ranging from guaranteeing healthcare to all Americans to providing employment opportunities to millions of Americans, and then even overhauling the transportation systems to eliminate pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. Some critics say these programs are impractical. Conservatives claim that the destruction of the fossil fuel industry will cost thousands of American jobs and hurt the economy, while supporters believe this is a necessary and bold step to preserve the health of our planet and revitalize our economy. So, what's your opinion on the practicality and potential effectiveness of some of the major provisions outlined in the Green New Deal?
Yeah. So really, really important question. I'll start by saying, while I fully support all the aspirations and resolutions in the Green New Deal, and they all align with what I believe as a person, what I think is important in terms of the environment moving forward. I think in the age of climate change, solutions have been way too broad. I think, I mean, it's a non-binding resolution. There's no obligations with the Green New Deal, just like the Paris Climate Agreement.
Mm,
In my opinion, what creates change, especially in terms of the environment, is smaller grassroots change, like changing policies on certain actions in terms of climate change, setting restrictions on what people can do, so that each person, each entity or business is required to at least make a small change in their output rather than throwing out massive targets with no requirements for individual businesses or people. Um, I think individuals and large corporations especially are going to need to step up and make changes while also accounting for environmental justice, disparities in opportunity and access, so that the more fortunate population economically does what's in their power, while um, a lot of people can't make changes, and that's not in their ability. I also think, unfortunately, the Green New Deal bringing in a lot of social aspects gave an easy out in a way for those who don't support it. It was criticized by a lot of people for appearing to have a socialist agenda, lack of a financial plan, having a really broad agenda rather than just like an environmental call to action. But I think, like I said, moving forward, it's important to consider the specifics of what need to be done. Like I know organizations such as the Nature Conservancy, which sparked my interest in working in the environment, and they work within states and communities to advocate for specific policy regarding climate change. And I think if broader national policy were to be able to focus more on preventing climate change rather than repairing damages from it, those organizations that have such a broad, like such a far reach, would be able to focus more on repairing environments that are going to actually stabilize rather than temporary solutions.
gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that all makes sense to me. It really. So you think that the focus should be not primarily, but more focused on regulation, right? These large corporations that are responsible for significant portion or significant percentage of our greenhouse gas emissions. They need to be regulated more heavily.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. All right. So moving on here. In August, President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act into law. It's a $739 billion bill to address the climate crisis, reduce drug costs, and establish a 15% minimum tax for large corporations. President Biden called it the biggest step forward on climate change ever. On the other hand, there are many climate groups and indigenous land and water defenders that have criticized the package for including major handouts, to the fossil fuel industry, which were added to win the support of conservative Democratic West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, who was also the largest recipient of fossil fuel industry funding.
Yeah.
How do you think progressives who are deeply concerned about climate change should view the Inflation Reduction Act? Do you view this as a historic, transformative policy package to fight climate change, as President Biden has said?
So this amount of money, $739 billion, can ideally be used to really address problems, and I don't think it's explicit enough to force those who need to change, and that's one of the large concerns for these people. In fact, in some cases, I think it provides resources for them to continue in the same path, which is a little bit unfortunate. I mean, it's an incredible sum of money. A lot of it's been um, used, I know, on air quality and pollution projects, which is good. Um, Also, I know it's targeting diesel emissions, research on that, and also completely wiping that out. But I think the pros of this of the IRA target large vehicles, air pollution research, and there's incentives for companies to reduce their emissions here with grants, but um, I worry that it's only forcing change in a subset of
Mhm.
a lot of massive polluters. Besides, um, yeah, I mean, a lot of the credits and incentives here mentioned in the legislation can be achieved through using fossil fuels still, or carbon capturing like offsets like that, which is largely unresearched. It's very temporary. It's kind of localized, rather than reaching um, further with solutions. I think a lot of the energy funding and agricultural processes that are talked about are achievable through fossil fuels, unfortunately.
Mhm.
And granting a lot of money to large energy corporations is going to allow them to continue in the same path, and not completely transition into EVs only, and electric. But not only is that bad emissions wise, but it disproportionately affects communities of color, because the land oftentimes being used is very frequently adjacent to um, those communities, and they experience the backlash of those toxins, the water quality issues, leaks, and I guess what I'm saying is investments in environmental justice concerns in communities are were not targeted or explicitly mentioned in the Inflation Reduction Act, which I think is a mistake. And um, I think this sum of money always has potential to pave the way for change, but it also has the potential to allow large corporations to keep functioning in the way that they have been.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's something that's so interesting. I haven't taken a super in-depth look at like all the provisions in it. And so just the information you provide me now is really eye-opening. And so it seems that like as opposed to threatening large corporations with some serious regulations, even perhaps using like antitrust law to threaten some of these corporations that function as monopolies. It seems that like it's instead of like using the like using the carrot more than the stick here and saying,
Yeah.
so you're offering more money if they meet some specific standards that what you're basically saying is can be met without even transitioning away from fossil fuels, which is
Yeah,
quite problematic. That's really interesting stuff.
absolutely. And there's also a lot of land leasing in the areas where this research for potentially renewable energy that's being done. These leases are being given right in a lot of places where there's communities of color right next to there. So it could also potentially even worsen the problem of environmental justice
Hmm.
if they continue to build into these communities. And yeah, I find that disturbing and not great.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on how it develops, how the money is ultimately spent, and what the effect it has in the next 5, 10 years will be.
Yeah.
Uh,
Hopefully positive. Yeah.
right. Yeah. Certainly. Um, all right. So we'll transition to a question about moving from climate change to a question about social justice here. So at this point, it's been a few years since George Floyd's murder at the hands of the Minneapolis police. During the protests following his death, there was much talk about police reform, with some even calling for defunding the police. In the last couple years, do you think enough has been done to fix the police brutality and corruption that poor people often endure in impoverished, cities and counties?
For for starters, I think education on these matters has skyrocketed since George Floyd's death, since Breonna Taylor's death, countless others who were killed in the past years. Outside of education, I remember a large number of cities like Los Angeles, I know some others, um, were planning to reallocate money from their policing budget to underfunded communities. Um, and a bunch of anti-violence programs, public schools, resources. I know school counseling was something that was going to be targeted, but I believe a lot of those local governments did not follow through. And I know defunding the police was a phrase that was used during that time. I absolutely agree with the idea, but we're seeing local governments back out. And with this in mind, I think change definitely has to come from oversight, and protocols concerning what it takes to become a part of the police force, and the motivation of becoming a police worker must be to protect, and purely that. I think the fact that there was a lot of initiatives to strengthen the police oversight on the recent ballots, is promising, but only if we vote. And that goes for a number of issues, but especially regarding this issue, I think it only furthers the importance to vote, engage in your community, find out what infrastructure is helping these issues, and or what infrastructure is posing problems for it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think to your point, the longest term effect that we've seen, I think, in the fallout of this of the protests and these terrible murders, it's probably been the education aspect and just the number of people that we've seen a massive increase in awareness of this issue, um, uh, particularly in I think in cities on the coast and liberal cities, people who were before politically engaged, but this may have not been the most important political issue to them, is now sort of on the plate of really important stuff that they care about. And I think that's how you get some of these grassroots movements started, so that people are informed when, to your point, different ballot initiatives come up. People can vote. They know what they're voting for, and they know what the impact of it can be. So, yeah, I
Yeah,
think, yeah, definitely the most long-term impact because, as you said, some of these other promises made by different local governments have ultimately fallen through.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And
all right.
I think I've
Mhm.
seen a lot of that, expansion in education per se at Colgate in terms of opportunities to go listen. I think especially in like the student athlete community at Colgate is probably one of the most diverse communities there. So they've really stressed to us, to attend these optional speakers they have, learn what you can do in your community at Colgate, but also at home. So I think, like you said, like education's been expanding since then.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. All right. So as we're running a bit low on time here, the last question I want to ask is about the excuse me, of college athletes unionizing. As you informed me earlier, your father was played a critical role in starting the MLS Players Union. And recently, the College Football Players Association was founded in an attempt to secure long-term medical care, a percentage of media revenue, and a host of other benefits for players. Do you think it's a good idea for college athletes to try and unionize?
I'm really glad you asked this question. It's incredibly important, and I think it's just for a lot of athletes, it's an idea that's being floated. A lot of people haven't entirely thought about it yet, but for me, what it comes down to for a college athlete is the question you should ask yourself in considering this is was my experience akin to being a worker with a job? If my soccer career was low key and I participated when I wanted and in the manner I wanted, uh, I wouldn't see a reason. But my college soccer career resembled a job that I loved, but still a job. And the ability to unionize doesn't just mean athletes would be demanding a salary. It means they would have the opportunity to enjoy like the same benefits afforded to employees in the United States. I think it's also really important to consider big schools with big revenues. Um, like when a player becomes invaluable on the field, they're more or less cut loose sometimes, and not everyone can afford that. You think about big time football players who are on full scholarships that they'll lose if they don't play, and that's an awful lot like a job. Yet they can't control it if they get hurt. So in terms of medical care, that's a real issue. Um, and unionizing would make sure that universities take care of their obligations on that front in many cases. But bottom line, in a job, you're employed to create wealth for your employer, which is exactly what college athletes are doing. So why should they not have the same benefits that uh, other employees have, or at least just know what they're afforded if needed? And so the bottom line, I would love to see college athletes unionized. By no means is it going to be perfect or fully understood, but there's no reason not to try. And I think it could be really, really big for a lot of people.
Yes, yeah, I tend to agree. I'm generally speaking a pro union guy, and I think it's interesting that this the NIL stuff has probably undercut somewhat efforts to unionize. I think
Mhm.
historically in this country, you see the biggest waves of unionization when different corporations are like really heavy-handed um, in their treatment of workers, refusing to kind of give them anything. And so they're forced to a point of unionizing. And so it'll be interesting to see if this, what relatively speaking is it's not even really a bone that the colleges have thrown to the players. It's giving them the freedom to make money outside of the institution.
Yeah.
If that the degree to which that'll placate athletes, how long it will, and if in time this becomes a serious effort that college athletes try to pursue.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah. But all right, let's see here. Okay, sure. So, well, we'll do one more question then. Yeah, I think this one's quite prevalent. So recently, the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, allowing states to make their own abortion laws with no oversight from the government. Some Republican states have already attempted to outlaw abortion completely to varying degrees of success. A lot of these ballot initiatives have failed in states that I think many thought they'd succeed in. Some would
Yeah.
even say that this had a pretty big impact on the midterm elections not being as successful for Republicans as they had predicted. Um, but what are your thoughts on the decision, the Supreme Court decision, and what would you like to see elected officials do in response to this?
Yeah. Very hard news this summer, regardless of the impact. I think in this situation, there's a lot of people, a lot of women who were uh, incredibly discouraged by the decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. It The idea of taking the control of someone's body out of their own hands almost made like, protests and struggles seem useless for a lot of women, which is awful. But the Supreme Court being the most conservative it has been in a while, and it is showing. Um, I feel like decisions like this have been made without considering the true effects of banning abortion, and like in a lot of cases, this is just going to lead to unsafe, unprotected abortions for people who can't afford um, or aren't allowed to get abortions. I think this situation shows dire need for decisions to be made regarding a wide factor of variables and not just following parties. But like you said, voting was absolutely crucial. I'd love to see elected officials continue to sponsor and pass pro-life bills and support pro-life campaigns. It was another thing that surprised me a bit
Oh,
coming out of that period.
sorry for interrupting. You mean pro-choice or?
Sorry,
I was.
pro-choice.
It's all good. Yeah, just wanted to clarify.
Absolutely. Yeah, sorry about that. That's what I meant. But something that surprised me coming out of that period, where everyone was so discouraged, we you saw to an extent that activism and awareness of the scale of abortion legislation like wasn't for nothing. Like you said, it's failing in a lot of places to uphold that. And I think Massachusetts even expanded their care after that. A lot of places are hyper aware of the situation now, and there's also a number of organizations and funds that are supporting women unable to get abortions financially or legally in their state. Um, and I've started a fundraising campaign with one called the Bridget Alliance, covering the travel, the lodging, the procedure. I'd love to share that with you. I think a lot of funds, a lot of groups are really stepping up right now and making it more available for people out of state to possibly get an abortion safely and in a protected manner.
Yeah, definitely. Please do share that. I'll be sure to tweet it out and then put it in the article I write as well. And yeah, no, definitely. And to your point, I think that's one of the great things to see in reaction to this is the number of organizations that are attempting to use funds that have been raised to help women who are in states where getting abortion is very difficult, travel to states that have expanded
Yeah,
healthcare in this regard um, uh, in response to this Supreme Court decision. It was
yeah,
interesting, seeing my wife who works in immigration law. Her organization, they saw similarly a really big increase in funding following President Trump's election for in a similar way. So while the policy and the decision itself not
yeah,
good, very bad, it's certainly heartening to see what the response on the other end has been.
yeah. Stepping up, exactly.
Hmm. Definitely. Well, I think that'll be the last of my questions. It's all the time we have for this evening. Bobby, thank you again so much, brother, for taking the time and speaking with me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. I really appreciate you reaching out and what you're doing here, and it's been a pleasure. I'm lucky to have gotten to know you a little bit. So thank you so much.
Yes, sir. We'll definitely keep in touch, and hopefully, I think my wife and I will be visiting Colgate in the next few months. So hopefully, we'll be able to catch up
Amazing.
then.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, brother.
All right.